Shabbat shalom. Most Americans alive have some association or connection with Shel Silverstein's masterpiece, The Giving Tree. Raise your hand if you're familiar with it. If you're anything like me, your reaction to it has changed from the first time you were exposed to it. I remember reading it in my town library growing up in Connecticut, and if I'm remembering accurately, which you never know, I remember being amazed at this beautiful, compact tale, poem, story, however you want to describe it, of the tree as an example of generosity and self-sacrifice and the deepest way to be in a bond of friendship or some other connection. When I've returned to it later on in my life, different emotions well up in me. I have no idea if this complicated set of emotions was Shel Silverstein's intent. I've never seen him interviewed or seen him write anything about it. But now when I come across it, I wonder, was the tree being asked to give too much? Is there a point at which your desire to be giving and generous to others end up in a surrender of your very self? Are we supposed to be amazed at the end of the giving tree, or find it to be pitiful? Are we supposed to imagine that we should live like that tree, giving and giving and giving, because that's what it means to share love? Or are we supposed to protect ourselves from giving in such a way that there's nothing left of us? And I am aware that there are many ways in which this poem or this piece of writing has been applied as a cautionary tale for individuals or categories of people who have in society been asked to give too much. Laborers, women, and anyone who might find themselves in a relationship that can devour them, even if that's not the intent. So is that tree a paragon of selflessness, or a warning about loving and giving so much that you have nothing left of yourself? This tension about whether or not it's possible to give so much that you lose too much actually exists in the rabbinic tradition for thousands of years. There's a wonderful midrash in Vayikra Rabbah, one of the classic collections of rabbinic tales on the book of Leviticus, that has Rabbi Yochanan, one of the great sages from 2,000 years ago. He's walking and is being helped by his student, Rabbi Chia bar Abba. The Talmud says, the Midrash says, that they're walking from Tiberias, the town on the western side of the Sea of Galilee, to Tzipori. This is them 2,000 years ago, walking the land of Israel as white European colonizers. And, couldn't stop myself. And this is what it says as it describes them walking through that ascent, because to get from Tiberias to Tzipori, it's quite a walk, and it's very hilly. It says that Rabbi Yochanan would pass a field, and he would say to his student, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, "You see that field? I used to own that field, but I sold it so that I could devote all the resources to studying Torah." And then they would walk on a little bit, and Rabbi Yochanan would say, "You see that vineyard, that beautiful vineyard of grapes? That used to be mine. I owned it. I tended it. I developed a lot from it. But I sold it and I divested myself from it so I could focus more on studying Torah. And you see that olive grove of amazing, healthy olive trees producing so many olives? That used to be mine. I owned it. I took all of the benefit from it. But I decided to sell it. It's no longer mine because I wanted to devote my time and my resources to studying Torah." The way the Midrash is reported, that at that moment his student, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, who was exposed to all these things that his teacher used to own, and now he doesn't own, he started to cry. He started to weep. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Why are you crying? He said, because you have nothing left for yourself. You've sold it all for Torah. And the response is, I sold something made in 7 days, a reference to the earth and the creation story, in order to earn something that was made in 40 days, a reference to the days that Moses was out Mount Sinai collecting, receiving, and transmitting the Torah. In other words, yeah, I gave up earthly possessions that only took God a week to create in order to acquire and to devote myself to something that took God more than a month to create. I had an upgrade. Who needs an olive field, a grove, and a field when you have God's most exquisite creation? If the Midrash would end there, then it would be a read, anachronistically, of the giving tree as praising that tree and that rabbi for giving up so much for something that was more precious, love of a friend and love of Torah. But that's not where the Midrash ends. The Midrash adds another line that says that when this story was told in future generations about the great Rabbi Yochanan, all of the students who listened to it would mock him, would use it as an example of giving too much, even in the pursuit of something that is significant. Both of those approaches can be applied to the topic of Shemitah, about which Lily already taught us beautifully. I want to go back into it just for a second. Imagine, and it's very hard to imagine because we're so far away from this time in history, and we're so far away from what it really means to be connected to agriculture, the land. Raise your hand. Are there any farmers amongst us? Right? For us, oh, wonderful. Your backyard. Okay. Most of us farm at Ralph's, right? And we have no real understanding of what it took to produce that cucumber or that tomato. Imagine a farmer who's being asked to produce double the output in the 6th year of the agricultural cycle, so there is, or double and a half, because he or she is not going to be able to touch that field during the 7th year and actually needs some extra stored up to begin the 8th year, which is the first year of the next cycle. It seems like a tremendous burden, a tremendous release that God is demanding of the ancient farmer in the name of love. Love of God, love of the land, love of living with religious principles. It seems to require so much restraint. And you can imagine even the pious farmer in the midst of that 7th year being cynical about this obligation, wishing it wasn't so much, finding himself with not having enough, no matter how much he or she tried to prepare. I can identify, even as someone who likes to think that were I alive in that era, I would have tried to follow the law as much as I can. I'd like to think that. I identify with the growing resentment that might build up for being asked to do that much for this God in heaven. Rabbi Aviva Richman, who is a wonderful teacher of Torah at Machon Hadar, the egalitarian think tank in New York, she says, maybe it's not just a burden that the laws of Shemitah were asking the Israelites to go through, but an invitation to an ecstatic, loving, and living with a certain amount of abandon and a willingness to give anything and everything up for the one that you love. She writes, but we can also picture the silent landowner watching as community members freely sustain themselves from what naturally grows from the field and vineyard. The reference I'm interpolating is that normally when you own a field during the 6 years, you control it. You work it. You harvest it. No one's allowed on your property unless you let them. But in the Shemitah year, it's not only that you could not work it, anyone was permitted. All of the stuff that was just there was called hefker. It belonged to anyone. So she says, rather than imagining the farmer being irritated by that, imagine the farmer celebrating that. My goodness, I can give this to anybody who wants it. Back to her. This hero has learned what it means to devote their time and resources to something only to see what others will do with it. Rather than resignation, or maybe alongside it, This could be a posture of curiosity and investment in others. During Shemitah, a landowner lets go of controlling the fruits of their labors. Instead, they see what other people could do with their investment. How wonderful. The restraint of Shemitah might lead to generative learnings. What outcomes can emerge from my investment when I let go of control? What impact can I have when I feel no more attachment to my own benefit than to anyone else's? When I feel just as invested in how others might access what I have so carefully tended. And our tradition, this is now back to my words, it bangs into our head that everything we think we own is actually on loan. Everything we are sure is our own, including time, truly belongs to the Holy One. And the notion that we really have it is an illusion. The story was told of the Chafetz Chaim, who was one of the great rabbinic sages in the late 19th, early 20th century. He was a legalist. He was a moralist. He did a lot of writing about the obligation to hold your mouth from evil tongue. And the story is told that an affluent American Jew once came to visit the rabbi in the rabbi's home in Poland, which was a lot harder to do in the early 1900s than it is today. And when this affluent American came to visit to pay homage to this teacher of Torah, he walked into the rabbi's home and he was astounded. Why was he astounded? Because the home was austere and minimal and almost empty, almost no furniture, almost no things. The man said, "Rabbi, where's all your stuff?" Rabbi said, "Where's all my stuff? Where's all your stuff?" The American said, "Me? I'm just passing through here." And the Chafetz Chaim said, "Me too. I'm just passing through here." We can all think of examples of such farmers, such Rabbi Yochanans, such Chafetz Chaims, who deserve to be praised and to be emulated and not to be mocked for their willingness to give up so much. We have family friends that we've known for decades. I remember a conversation with them when they were young parents, beginning their careers, and really not earning much at all, and struggling every week and every month to take care of their basic obligations. And they said the first thing that they do when they are paid, before they buy a single obligatory thing for themselves, is they take a portion of what they've earned and they give it to tzedakah. I remember asking them, amazed by that way of thinking about money, why do you do it at the beginning rather than when you have completed all of your obligations? And they said, we give it first because if we don't give it now, there might not be any leftover, and then what will our earnings really have been for? That's an incredible way to think of what you own, of what has been given to you, to start with your obligation to give it to someone else. And I admire that. And there's an and. They have struggled economically for decades. They never, to this day, with their children in their 20s, really have enough. And we worry about them. And we love them. And it's hard to know, did they give too much tzedakah? Did they prioritize others over themselves? It's hard to say, but at times I know they feel like they are financially only a stump. Their shmita, their holding back on spending on themselves is amazing. But when is it too much? Because it leaves us with not enough. I read from the end of the giving tree. And after a long time, the boy came back again. "I'm sorry, boy," said the tree, "but I have nothing left to give you. My apples are gone." "My teeth are too weak for apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing on them." "I'm too old to swing on branches," said the boy. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You can't climb." "I'm too tired to climb," said the boy. "I am sorry," sighed the tree. "I wish that I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I'm just an old stump. I am sorry." "I don't need very much now," said the boy. "Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I am very tired." "Well," said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could, "well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down. Sit down and rest." And the boy did, and the tree was happy. Every time I read it, both things well up. These laws of Shemitah are teaching us to give to the tree so that the land will be happy, and teaching us to let go of some things with relish, with abandon, with love. And Shemitah was hard. Not everyone in the ancient world did it. It was asking a lot of that generation. And living that way asks a lot of us too. There can be risks in the beauty of living that generously. There can be prices to pay, literally and figuratively. And we keep having to ask ourselves, are we up to it? Are we up to loving so much, but without losing too much? Are we up to giving, but still having enough to go on living? Can we live by being so very generous to others, while never losing sight of the wonder, of the obligation, of the holiness, of also being good to yourself? Shabbat Shalom.